So today is an amazing and important day. I am here with Kimberly Currier, who is the Vice President of Global. We're going to try that one more time. Okay. So today is a very exciting and special day. I am thrilled to be here with Kimberly Currier, who is the Global Vice President of Talent Development at AECOM. Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be included.
Of course. So before we jump into a very timely and important topic of the importance of vision during disruptive times, and just a side note, it's very easy to lose sight of vision when people are emotional and kind of in panic mode a little bit. So I really look forward to hearing your nuggets of wisdom. And before we jump in, though, can you share a little bit? Was there a person or a situation or what really inspired you to climb to the talent, to the kind of the apex of your role?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started in learning and development in back when it was kind of considered training before I would call the profession had evolved to what it is today, which could be a strategic business partner. And I think I ended up there because I'm a pretty good public speaker and advanced degrees and certificates from Wharton and so on. But the career itself has really evolved. But I had a COO who saw the insight I brought in terms of human behavior and saw that I had a way of engaging with our organization to help people build broader capabilities. And so that kind of began my path towards what I would call now, an executive in a learning development function. I've had lots of great influences along the way. I'm a huge fan and believer in Peter Senge, which is a lot of where the work around personal vision has come from. So in my becoming a talent development leader, I've also had the opportunity to have insight to and certification, if you will, in such great content in the industry, which has helped shaped my leadership style and my commitment to building capability in others. But yeah, at the core, I think I just kind of love humans, and I know that sounds silly, but I love humans. I grew up in a team sport environment. We'll talk a little bit about that maybe, but it's inspired me to kind of want to be in an environment where I'm always helping others be successful. It speaks to my passion.
So let's just talk about the sport for a moment because, of course, I love that. It's the world that I come from as far as working
Right.
with Olympians and amazing female leaders such as yourself. So tell us a little bit about how team sports impacted you as a leader.
Yeah. So I wasn't an Olympian, but I certainly played athletics at a high level through college. I found the sport of softball thanks to my parents at the age of 8. And I think they kind of dragged me to it thinking she needs something to do. And I fell in love with the sport. And I played softball all the way through college. It helped pay for my college education. And I competed at Division 1 level all the way through. Still have a couple of I think records on the record book at Furman University.
Wow.
But more importantly, I was blessed with amazing coaches and teammates who really demonstrated the value of everybody having their own skill set, but all of that working together in harmony, and having someone who you could rely on to help direct you and steer you, and having a place where you've got a community of people where you're in it together and you have a shared goal and a shared vision. And in retrospect, now I can apply that to teaming at an organization level. But as I was coming up, I was just supremely blessed to be in those environments from the time I was 8. I happened to be good at pitching. I was a pretty good pitcher. And so that's how, I had the opportunity to go ahead and grow that. I worked hard, but I also, had great coaching and support and love of my parents and, willingness to go out and work with me at all hours of the day and drive all around to tournaments all over the Southwest of the United States.
Yeah, I love that. So I have two boys that play Division 1 tennis. And while that's not necessarily a group sport, but a lot of times they were on a team. And my daughter was captain of the tennis team in high school. And tell me if you agree with this or not, but it seems like sport teaches you to be resilient because you don't win all the time. I mean, sometimes you do all the things that you're supposed to do and you still lose, and you just have to say,
Yep.
congratulations, other team. Like, what did I learn from them? How do I get better? And I feel like sport teaches you to be gritty and also to understand that it's not all about number one, there's other people
Yeah.
that it's important to bring the best out in them so you can win. So, what are your thoughts or what was your experience?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think that being in a team environment and knowing that everybody has a role to play, and if you all do it well, you may win and you may lose, but you still did it together. A team can't win alone with a pitcher. They need a first baseman and a center fielder and a third baseman. They also need people who can hit in the ball and get make runs scored and things of that nature. So together we are achieving goals, and I think those are timeless lessons as we can talk about. I also think I really like that word grittiness that you use, because I do think that when you're in sports, regardless of the level, even if you don't ascend to college level or Olympian level, you do learn kind of that work ethic. If you want to be good at something, you've got to get in there and try and work through it, even if you're having a bad day, being very determined and focused on what achieve or what skills you're trying to advance. And that applies to anything, but non-team sports as well, right? It's a tennis player, they've got to serve and get their volleys back in the right place in the court, and so on. And so all of that requires repetition and skill and commitment and knowing what you're trying to accomplish. That practice cannot be overlooked. And so being willing to work that hard in preparation for what the showtime looks like is all part of that journey. And those are all skills we can learn and benefit from moving from sports to professional world. I'll just also add, for those non-sports people out there, I think drama and music play the same roles. Student government, debate, all of those types of things have those same connections in terms of having a goal and focusing it. And so anytime someone's involved in something, as a young person, and there's tons of lessons that can apply to how they form up and become a leader in an organization or throughout their life. Leadership is honestly, at the end of the day, about self-leadership first.
Yeah, I love that so much. And then I'm also wanted to highlight something that you said is that your parents kind of, I don't want to say dragged you into it, but said, "Hey, you're going to try this." As come up,
Yeah.
us parents now, you
Yeah.
probably maybe done that if you have kids or nieces or
Yeah.
nephews. But you said that you excelled at it and did it through college, excuse me, Division 1, because you loved it. And so a lot of questions and a lot, like I would say there's been a big shift, but half of my clients now are figuring out what's next. And a lot of times clarity can be fluid. And I really love that you said that you endured this really because you loved it. And so if you're listening to this, sometimes you may have loved what you're doing, but maybe you would love to try something else. And
Absolutely.
and so I think that will tie in nicely to our conversation around vision, because sometimes we get on that wheel and we're just striving so hard, even if we're not necessarily happy. And I honestly think, in my humble opinion, that's what really contributes to burnout, is when we're working ultra hard at something that we are not necessarily passionate about.
I could not agree more. And leaning into that energy, and also having the courage to say, I'm good. Like I'm stepping back and I need a minute. And you know, I had an opportunity to advance softball. The Olympics were spinning up the first time. That's not to say or presume that I would have made the Olympic team. Let me be very clear on that. But I did have a chance to potentially try out. And I was done. I was done with softball. I was ready to move on to the next phase of my life. I didn't want to be in the constant churn of traveling every weekend to play, and the workouts, because a pitcher has to work out at practice, but then also go do their pitching workout. And it's a little bit different. And so, I knew then and that I didn't want to continue. And I've made similar choices in my life, in making career choices about when to go or stay from a location, or where to go and stay in terms of exploring themes. And all of that takes courage, and you have to be able to kind of know yourself well enough to make that decision for yourself at that time. So if you're hearing this and if you're at that stage in your life, like, hang in there, you can do it. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, I so believe actually when I was getting my master, I won't tell you when, but 100 years ago at USC, I was getting my master's in applied sports psychology, and they had a class on the sociology of sport. In other words, how sport is a microcosm of society. Basically, it mirrors life. And so you have another amazing life lesson that stood out, and we're going to be talking about vision. A lot of times our vision tends to be what we think we should do next, not what we want to do next. And so you had the courage to say, no, I'm good. But if you're listening to this, maybe you're an individual contributor and your vision is to be the best individual contributor. Like, you do not have
Absolutely.
anybody record. I'm thinking about this because this is something that my husband was just talking about. But he was saying, I do not want anybody reporting to me. I have done
Yeah.
that. He's done that for
Yeah.
decades. He wants to be laser focused. And that's okay. Maybe you're a manager, maybe you're a director. You want to be the best at where you are. So maybe your vision is next level. Maybe you should have the courage, like Kimberly did, to say, I'm good. I'm going to be the best at where I am. Or it could be the next thing. It could be the next step of the ladder. But I really love that you had that courage to say where you were good and when you wanted to make a shift. And so, what then has really been talking about sport and life and career, what has been the major mindset that's allowed you to keep going in your career? Because a lot of times, if, for any of you that don't know Kimberly, we're just meeting you, and like similar to me, we might think that you were just born into the world as a global VP talent development. You've had no hardship since the
Yeah.
beginning of your career, and everything has been unicorns and rainbows. Um, and so maybe that's not the case. And so, have there ever been kind of a sidestep or a misstep or something not so ideal happen? And then also, what's been the mindset that's helped you stay the course?
Yeah. I'm going to answer it kind of in two buckets, if I could. If the answer in two buckets. The first is, I had the great privilege of working for the American Cancer Society for a very long time with some of the finest human beings I've ever met. I worked there from 1994 to 2014. And got to help the American Cancer Society itself grow its talent development and strategic HR function. And that was a full privilege. But it never really recovered from the economic downfall after 9/11 and the economy collapse thereafter. And it had to make different decisions in order to keep the money going towards research and patient services. And so one of the biggest first turns, I would say, that potentially a setback, was to leave this place that I had been for so long, with these people that felt like family, with these clients that I serve, both as staff and volunteers. It was such a secure place. And to leave there and go to Kimberly-Clark, which was a 35,000 people global company, and do kind of a fraction of the job that I was doing at the American Cancer Society, but at a much larger scale, and test myself in a different way. And so I had to be willing to kind of leave this place that I love and this mission that I valued so very much, and this job that was full and round, leading all of talent management and talent development, to a little bit more focused job at Kimberly-Clark, but gave me the opportunity to travel to 12 countries in 2 years and meet a whole bunch of different people. And so, maybe that's not a setback so much as it's just a really interesting turn. And I think sometimes we think we have to, like always expand our scope and our scale, and we have to always like be growing. But I think sometimes growth lies in taking a step back and a step sideways, at looking at what's going to be important for your happiness, for your mindset. I desperately wanted to travel globally. I hadn't left the continent yet. At the age of 39, I hadn't left the continent, and I've been to 25 countries since then. And so I really wanted to make a turn and focused a little bit of my energy on what that might look like in a career shift, while being really sad. I mean, it was like breaking up with a partner when I left the American Cancer Society, as you can imagine. So that's kind of the first one that I'd talk about in terms of a step back or a change that brought me a different perspective. I have another one that's a little bit more personal, but do you want to unpack that at all before
Sure, whatever you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah. So my other one is I joined AECOM in October 1st, essentially, of 2019. And as we all know, the pandemic hit in spring of 2020. And also our CEO announced their retirement. And then we subsequently got a new CEO. Our CHRO left, and we got first an interim and then a permanent new CHRO. We did a whole HR transformation, all in the middle of the pandemic. And I was simultaneously diagnosed with a very rare autoimmune disease and a very rare cancer. All in 2020. It's like a big bow wrapped up of craziness. And it was a really trying and challenging time for lots of reasons, but it was also one of those times where I really had to step back. And the move I had made to AECOM was a smaller role, again, with a bigger company. And then as the HR transformation occurred, lots of deck chairs were getting moved around, and I ended up with just a very small focus in terms of leadership development at AECOM, which I had been doing for decades and was very comfortable doing, but wasn't presenting with a lot of stretches or challenges in terms of the work. And I went round and round about it for about a day. And then I was like, Kimberly, you have just come through one of the most trying times personally that I'd ever had. Not the only trying time, but one of the most trying times personally. I was still grappling with these diagnoses, and maybe just to do this stuff you're really good at and not worry about the rest. Don't put your ambition aside for a second and just focus on the things that are most important. And it was, it's emerged, obviously it's evolved. I have a broader role now today at AECOM and all of that, but that has been as a result of doing great work and being happy where I was. And that's been a huge life lesson that is tied to a pretty significant shift in the world, i.e. the pandemic, the organization, a huge structural change for the organization, and me personally with those that all kind of coincided at the same time. And it's been really interesting to apply those learnings year after year. I'm about 5 years post-diagnosis. And it's been really interesting to apply those learnings year after year as I navigate my career and my life in general. So lots of interesting learnings there that happened out of that disruption, for sure.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that you're at that 5-year mark. I know for many reasons that's a really important marker to be at. And a lot of times when you're thinking of vision, it could be vision in your career, but there's a more broader vision.
Absolutely.
And also too, I love what you were thinking, like initially sometimes like our ego gets in the way of like, I've done that. Why am I only limited to this? But sometimes, okay, I always say I'm 90% scientific and 10% woo-woo. Maybe the
Yeah,
universe was like, girl, just focus on what you're doing.
totally.
And then like, don't worry, be patient, just, and so if you're listening and you were kind of like, humph, with your hands on your hips, wondering why something like, whether it's not a big enough role or what's happening a lot these days, or maybe some people are getting reorged and reorged out. And it's like it seems like you are doing what I tell a lot of people to do, which is comforting. And that's not, why did this happen to me? It's like, what are the learnings from
How
this? And
can
why
I,
did it happen for me?
yeah, and what can I take from it and make, it's like, it's an old saying, like make lemonade from lemons.
Yeah.
Yes, make lemonades from lemons. But honestly, like, you only have the ability to control what you can control. And then you have a secondary ability to influence things around you. And then everything else, you just have to work within those confines. And so it's funny you say patience, because one of the things that I kept coming back to during that time was like patience and grace for the organization, patience and grace for the world, patience and grace for yourself. And it was clearly the universe was trying to teach me a lesson around patience and grace. I kept coming back to that. And kind of that's been rooted with me. And in fact, someone just last week was like, patience and grace, Kimberly. I'm like, that's right.
Yeah.
I have to remember that. It was a really interesting kind of exploration in that way. Is like setting aside your ego and setting aside and just having to find what the universe is going to do, and then control what you can control within it. Like, I can worry about what I can worry about is how good I show up in the job they've given me.
Mm-hmm.
I can worry about like what I do to help this team and this organization be better and achieve its goals. And I have a lot of responsibility in that, from knowing our business strategy to helping the leadership development participant who calls me and they need some coaching, and everything in between. And all of that has a positive influence on a shared goal that I'm choosing to be a part of as AECOM, as being a part of AECOM. And I think most importantly, contributes to my personal vision. My personal vision is to live a big life. And that includes like a full and enriching professional life, or a well-rounded and beautiful family life, lots of travel and exploration, friends, good food, pretty garden. There's hundreds of things underneath that. And, and part of that is having pride in the work I do and believing in the work I do. And so, in controlling what I can control and showing up the best that I can, regardless of the circumstances, means that I am honoring myself in my vision, as well as honoring the work that I do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's like you have agency. You realize that you have
That's
agency.
right.
And so, I mean, the first question is, am I going to stay or am I going to go? So you've decided I'm going to stay. So once you decide, I always say decide. It phonetically, it means death of, like I say death of any
Yeah.
other option. So you decide, if you're going to decide to stay, you decided to show up and be your
That's right.
best. So, getting back then to the topic of vision during disruptive times, what has really helped in a business sense? Well, why is that important? Because I know, at least from what I've heard and from my clients, that sometimes, hopefully there's not too many CEOs listening, but the CEOs are being pushed by the board and earnings.
Yeah.
They're kind of hitting the panic button for short time wins. And that is all driven by like emotion and fear, which isn't the best place to drive a vision. And so, why do you think vision is important, and especially important during disruptive times?
Because if you're confident, I think vision can be deeply personal, and that's where I start, always with personal leadership. It could be shared vision from a team perspective, like what are we doing to contribute, be a family vision, and it also could be a corporate vision. And vision helps you stay rooted on the things that are most important and highest and best use to serve what you're trying to create in the world. Right. So it gives you a filter with which, if you're an Excel person, it gives you the little drop downs to sort through. I'm not an Excel person, but it gives me a filter by which to make decisions. What's going to serve who I want to be in the world? What's going to serve my team? What's going to serve my organization? And if you can stay focused on that, particularly in disruptive times, you can create the space to quiet the noise of the panic to quiet the interference of the chaos that other people, other things are controlling. With a lot of global disruption going on right now. We could spend a whole hour just listing that. We could spend all of our time focusing on that, but if we focus over here on what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's you individually or you as an organization, and really lean into that, I think that you'll find that where you put your energy is what's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So the thing you focus on is the thing that happens. So if you're focusing on this disruption and chaos, then of course all of your energy and emotional time is going to be spent over here focusing on that, and nothing productive comes from that, because you can't control a war in Russia and the Ukraine. You can't control our global economy. You can't control the stock market. But what I can control is how I contribute, or how I lead, or how I do that. And so focusing on the things that are most important, that are rooted in your vision, and put your energy towards it, where you can make incremental gains, where you can make progress. That I think is affirming, and it helps you then find energy for the next challenge and the next challenge and the next challenge. And so just kind of being clear, rooted in who you are, what you're trying to create individually, team, organization, and then that's where you're going to put your energy. That's how you're going to make your decisions. That's where you're going to make your investment of time and energy and resources. And so, and it's easy. This is long-winded, so I'll stop after this statement, but to say it's so easy when things are chaotic to get derailed and just spiral up and spin and focus on everything else and worry about everything else. It is so easy to do that. And I think, having partnership and people in your life who can help you step back, or doing something that roots you back in who you are and what you're trying to be and do, is critically important at those times. So how can you continue to re-examine and reroute yourself on the things that are important to you and how you've defined them? So that's the power vision can give you in disruptive times, is you've got something to go back to. You've got to define something that you've built for yourself to go back to. So you know what you are, who you are in the world, and how you want to show up.
Yeah, I love that so much. And to further emphasize, it's kind of like probably like practicing, whether it's practicing difficult conversations in your role or practicing softball, it's important to practice before things get
Totally.
get too
Yeah.
unglued. So in other words,
Yeah.
so just to have this vision, maybe have quiet time or practice just being still and being focused and being tuned in, just like Kimberly was saying. And one question that I love that might be helpful to help people do exactly what you're talking about is to just, first of all, like have a stop sign. Like we all know it happens to
Yeah.
everybody, probably
I like
still
that
happens to
analogy.
you. I'm just putting that out there.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens to me. It happens to like everybody. But just sometimes you're like, nope, stop. Nope, we don't trust that thinking anymore. It's kind of like my mental stop sign. And then I'd pause and like, how do I want this to turn out?
Yeah.
And then figuring out the next best step. And sometimes the next best step is just taking a 10-minute break or taking the weekend off or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I love that vision, and it seems like it's even especially important during disruptive times. And so, what do you think are the consequences in an organization if we don't do this?
Yeah. I think consequences in an organization that lack vision show up in a couple of ways. One, the decision-making matrix becomes destabilized because there's all of these disruptive inputs coming in, and the leadership don't have a clear understanding of what the priorities are. So, a vision, at AECOM, our vision is to deliver a better world, and we have priorities that we focus in on and narrow in on every single year. And so when disruption comes at us, We sit down, our executive leadership team sits down. I'm not a part of that. I want to give full credit to our CEO for all of that great work. But they sit down and they reroute on what are our priorities, where do we need to be focusing our time and energy, what's going to serve us the most this year. And then that's where they reroute their focus and their energy. So when you lack that clarity, both that is shared, clarity that is shared, this is an important part of it. Clear vision and priorities that is owned and shared by our executive team, but is then absolutely disseminated throughout the organization. We work hard so that all 55,000 people on our team understanding of what we're trying to do. Now, will all 55,000 people be able to repeat it verbatim? No, of course not. But if their leaders leading in that are working towards those shared goals, then they're helping them lead in that direction. So we do actually teach personal vision within AECOM. So what happens is if you don't have it, things get disruptive. You might lose focus. You might chase small wins, like you said earlier. You're going to chase these small little wins, which divert your time and energy away from the long-term strategic foundational wins. You might respond in an emergency mindset instead of really focusing on what is at the core. So what's the problem or the challenge that we're trying to serve systemically, not the symptom that we're trying to treat with a Band-Aid. So the Band-Aid is the emergency thinking, and the long-term vision thinking is like, what's at the core? What are we trying to do? How do we need to fix the system that has caused this problem? And so I think, disruption can show up lots of different ways, whether or not we're having globally tumultuous times. You could have, an aggressive buyer coming after your company, or a board disruption, or leadership team turnover. That shows up in companies large and small, and just having clarity of what you guys are trying to do as a collective, what is the purpose that you serve, I think will always benefit in these times when disruption pops in and things can feel crazy.
Yeah. So it's important, if you're listening, to, even if it may seem a little bit overwhelming, especially during disruptive times, but I always say,
Totally.
if you can one or two things out, and consistency is always more important than how long or how much. So even if it's a few minutes a day, or getting something on the calendar with yourself or your team, or just think of ways to take what Kimberly has said to heart and implement it into your life and your team. I think, at least at the recording time, we have 6 months left of the year. I think it will make a remarkable difference in how the year turns out. So, Kimberly, do you have any closing remarks or call to action, or what do you want the listeners to know and to remember?
Yeah, I have kind of two thoughts to close out, which I think are rooted in vision and how we kind of feed and support ourselves in these crazy and tumultuous times. And I just recently had a chance to meet and learn from a Columbia professor who's also he calls himself a mathematician and a mysticist. His name is Hitendra Wadha. And he has a new book called Inner Mastery, Outer Impact. And I was really moved by the book, and I mention it because it really resonated with me. And the thing that really I took away from it is that if you don't care for yourself, then you don't have capacity to care for others. If you don't find peace in yourself, then you don't have peace with others. If you don't have patience with yourself, then you don't have capacity for patience with others. And so just as in these disruptive times, it's more and more important to take a set aside and do something that fuels your soul. That could be to ride a bike, or take your dog for a walk, or play with your children, or have a cocktail with your closest friends, or whatever that means to you. It's going to be very individual, but take that time to feed your soul in all of those ways, so that you have the time and energy and the capacity to do it others, to share that around. And the second message I had, it kind of resonates on the back of that, which is this idea that the abundance mentality. I worry so much that right now people are in this scarcity mentality of like, if they're getting it, I'm losing it. And I think we have to always remember that in the world, and women in particular, I think have to remember that in the world, there's room for great work and great sponsorship and great recognition for everybody. And if we take the time to think about abundance as a mindset versus scarcity, which leads to competition and divisiveness, but like abundance, we are in it together and we can help and serve each other. I think this just ultimately that will help shape the relationships you have, and that has, you know, the rock in the pond has a huge effect as it goes out in the world. So keep that abundance mentality close at hand as we move through this world.
Oh, I love that so much. So abundance mentality and to really take good care of yourself is so important. I would just want to piggyback on that and say it's not selfish, it's necessary. So you can take
Totally.
care of everyone else, whether it's on your team or in your family and otherwise. So grant permission yourself. Permission granted here, not that you need it, but
Yeah,
give
totally.
permission to yourself for all of this. And Kimberly Currier, congratulations on all of your success up to this point and for taking the
Thank
time.
you.
And I look forward to following your journey.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.